Welcome to English Stories Cube. Today, we travel to the beautiful and powerful land of South Africa. It is a country at the southern tip of Africa, a land of golden grasslands, wild animals, sparkling oceans, and many different people and cultures. But for many, many years, South Africa was also a land of great injustice. Black people were treated as less than human by the white minority government. They could not vote. They could not live in certain areas. They could not use the same schools, hospitals, or buses as white people. This cruel system was called apartheid, a word that means separateness in the Afrikaans language. Into this world of injustice, one man rose up. One man refused to stay silent. One man fought, not with hatred, but with dignity, courage, and an unbreakable belief in freedom. That man was Nelson Mandela. This is his story. It is a story of suffering, strength, forgiveness, and hope. Read it slowly, read it aloud, and let it inspire you in English and in life. Chapter 1. A Village Boy with a Big Dream. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvizo, in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa. His father was a chief of the Thembu people, a respected and important man in their community. The name Rolihlahla in the Xhosa language means pulling the branch of a tree, but people often translated it more simply as troublemaker. It was a funny and fitting name, as the world would soon discover. When Nelson was 7 years old, he became the first person in his family to go to school. On his first day, his teacher gave all the students English names, as was the custom at mission schools at that time. His teacher called him Nelson, and so Nelson Mandela was born. His father died when Nelson was only 12 years old. After this, Nelson was sent to live with a senior chief named Janjantaba Dalandibo, who became his guardian. This man was kind and educated. He treated Nelson like his own son and made sure he received a good education. Nelson was a bright and curious student. He listened carefully to the stories of elders, stories about how Africa was before the European colonizers came. He heard stories of brave African warriors and great kingdoms. These stories filled his heart with pride and planted a seed of justice inside him. Chapter 2. The Young Lawyer Who Said No. Nelson Mandela was a gifted student. He studied at the University of Fort Hare, one of the very few universities in South Africa that accepted black students at that time. But Nelson was not just a student. He was already becoming an activist. He was involved in a student strike against unfair university rules. Because of this, he was expelled, forced to leave the university. He moved to Johannesburg, the biggest city in South Africa, to continue his studies and his life. In Johannesburg, Nelson worked in a law firm and studied law at the same time. He became a qualified lawyer, one of the very few black lawyers in South Africa. He opened a law office with his friend Oliver Tambo. It was the first black law firm in the country. Every day, Nelson saw the cruelty of apartheid up close. He saw black men and women treated with disrespect by white officials. He saw families separated. He saw people arrested simply for being in the wrong area at the wrong time. He saw the suffering of his people, and every day, his determination grew stronger. He knew he could not simply stand by and watch. He had to act. He had to fight, not just in the courts, but in the streets, in politics, and in the hearts of people. Chapter 3. The Freedom Fighter. In 1944, Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, known as the ANC. This was a political organization that fought for the rights of black South Africans. Mandela quickly became one of its most important young leaders. In 1948, the white minority government made apartheid even stronger and more cruel. New laws were passed. Black South Africans could not vote. They had to carry a passbook everywhere they went, like a passport inside their own country. They were forced to live in certain areas called townships, far from white neighborhoods. Mandela and the ANC organized protests, strikes, and campaigns of peaceful resistance. They asked people to refuse to follow unjust laws. They marched. They demonstrated. They spoke out loudly and bravely. But the government responded with violence. Police arrested protesters. Leaders were beaten and jailed. Still, Mandela did not stop. He believed that the fight for freedom was worth any sacrifice. In 1960, a terrible event happened. In the town of Sharpeville, police opened fire on a crowd of peaceful black protesters. 69 people were killed. The world was shocked. The ANC was banned, made illegal. Mandela went underground, secretly continuing his work for freedom. He traveled across Africa into England, building support for the anti-apartheid movement. He trained as a soldier. He was determined to do whatever it took to free his people. Chapter 4. 27 years in prison. In 1962, Nelson Mandela was captured by the South African police. He was arrested, put on trial, and charged with serious crimes against the government. At his trial, Mandela gave a speech that became one of the most famous speeches in history. He stood in court and said, calmly and with great dignity, that he had fought against white domination, and he had also fought against black domination. He said he believed in a democratic and free society where all people could live together in harmony. And then he said these unforgettable words, "It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison. He was sent to Robben Island, a cold, lonely prison island off the coast of Cape Town. His cell was tiny, just 6 feet by 6 feet. He slept on a thin mat on the floor. He was given very little food. He was forced to do hard labor in a lime quarry, breaking rocks in the hot sun. The lime damaged his eyes, and he suffered eye problems for the rest of his life. For 27 long years, Mandela stayed in prison. 27 years. He missed his children growing up. He missed weddings, funerals, and the ordinary moments of life. His first wife divorced him. His second wife, Winnie Mandela, became a famous activist in her own right, keeping his name and cause alive. But even inside his tiny prison cell, Mandela never gave up. He studied. He read books. He continued to lead the ANC from behind bars. He exercised every morning to keep his body and mind strong. He refused to let prison break his spirit. Chapter 5. The World Stands Up. While Mandela sat in prison, something remarkable was happening outside. The whole world was watching South Africa, and the whole world was saying, "This is wrong." People in countries all over the world joined the anti-apartheid movement. Students in universities held protests. Musicians wrote songs about Mandela. Artists painted his face on walls. The phrase "Free Nelson Mandela" was heard in cities from London to Tokyo to New York. In 1988, a huge concert was organized at Wembley Stadium in London to celebrate Mandela's 70th birthday and demand his freedom. More than 600 million people watched it on television around the world. It was one of the biggest moments in the history of music and political activism. Many countries also placed sanctions on South Africa. They refused to do business with the apartheid government. This hurt the South African economy. The government began to feel the pressure from all sides. Inside South Africa, too, the resistance was growing. Young people were rising up. The cost of maintaining apartheid, in money, in violence, in international shame, was becoming too great. The apartheid government began to realize change was coming. The question was no longer if, it was how. Chapter 6, Walking Out Free. In 1989, a new president came to power in South Africa, F.W. de Klerk. He was a white Afrikaner, part of the same group that had created apartheid. But de Klerk was also a realist. He knew that South Africa could not continue the way it was going. De Klerk began secret negotiations with Mandela in prison. They talked. They listened. They tried to find a way forward together. Then, on February 2nd, 1990, de Klerk made a dramatic announcement. He unbanned the ANC and other political organizations. He released many political prisoners. And then came the news that the whole world had been waiting for. Nelson Mandela would be freed. On February 11th, 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, a tall, elegant, gray-haired man of 71 years old. He held his fist high in the air. Beside him walked his wife Winnie, her fist raised too. Millions of people around the world watched on television. Many cried. Many cheered. Many simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by the moment. Nelson Mandela was free, and South Africa and the world would never be the same again. Chapter 7, President Mandela, a Miracle of Forgiveness. After his release, Mandela immediately got back to work. He led negotiations between the ANC and the government to end apartheid and create a new, democratic South Africa. It was not easy. There were people on both sides who wanted violence. Some wanted revenge against white South Africans. Some white South Africans feared what a black-led government would mean for them. The situation was fragile and dangerous. But Mandela did something extraordinary. He chose forgiveness over revenge. He spoke to both black and white South Africans. He told them, "We must build this country together. There is no future in hatred. There is only a future in unity." In April 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections. The first time in the country's history that all people, black and white, could vote. People waited in lines for hours, some for the very first time in their lives. There were tears of joy everywhere. Nelson Mandela won the election. On May 10th, 1994, he was inaugurated as the first black president of South Africa. He was 75 years old. At his inauguration, he said something remarkable. He invited as his special guests 3 of the prison guards who had kept him in jail on Robben Island. He wanted to show the world what forgiveness really looked like. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a special body where people who had committed crimes during apartheid could confess, and victims could tell their stories. It was not perfect, but helped South Africa begin to heal. Chapter 8, Madiba's Legacy, a Light That Never Goes Out. Nelson Mandela served as president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. After one term, he chose to step down, something rare for an African leader at the time. He believed that democracy meant no one person should hold power for too long. After leaving office, Mandela continued working for peace, education, and health, especially the fight against HIV and AIDS in Africa. He established the Nelson Mandela Foundation to continue his work. In South Africa, Mandela was called Madiba, his clan name, used as a sign of deep love and respect. The word Madiba came to mean much more than just one man. It meant dignity. It meant forgiveness. It meant hope. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5th, 2013, at the age of 95. The world mourned together. Leaders from nearly every country in the world attended his memorial service in Johannesburg. Ordinary people left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes outside the South African embassy in cities around the globe. Today, July 18th, Mandela's birthday, is celebrated around the world as Mandela Day. People are encouraged to spend 67 minutes helping others, 1 minute for every year Mandela spent in public service. His face is on South African currency. His statue stands in many cities around the world. His words are quoted by presidents, activists, teachers, and students everywhere. But perhaps his greatest legacy is the simplest one. He showed us that one person, with enough courage and enough love, can change the world. Not through hatred, not through violence, but through dignity, patience, and an unbreakable belief that all human beings deserve to be free. Thank you for reading this story. Mandela's life teaches us that freedom is worth fighting for, that forgiveness is stronger than revenge, and that no prison, no matter how strong, can lock up the human spirit. Keep reading, keep learning, and like Madiba, never, ever give up. It always seems impossible until it is done.